I didn't always love myself. For so many years, starting in adolescence, I felt obligated to shrink myself in ways that would hide my light. My attraction to other male-identified people was more of an embarrassment and shame than anything else. I couldn't be alone with my thoughts for too long because they often reinforced those feelings of inadequacy and shame. Instead, I tried to overcompensate by surrounding myself with people. I became the class clown in school. I joined multiple after-school activity groups and genuinely reveled in being an extrovert. I was so content in actively attending to the needs of others so as to never have to attend to my own. Yes, I didn't always love myself. As I aged, my surroundings only emphasized my shameful difference. I was prohibited from playing with my cousins of similar age without adult supervision. I was called fag on the daily by my peers and ridiculed for my effeminate nature. Even when I tried to fit in by playing football, was I met with hate, often playing ball games in urine-soaked football pads deposited by my supposed teammates. While these personal insults were egregious, they were mild in comparison to the hate spewed from the nightly news or often from my own dinner table. I witnessed scorn and hate for people living with AIDS and was constantly told that eternal love was not available to queer folk like me. People like Matthew Shepard, whose grotesque massacre scarred my soul and ensured that it would be years before I spoke of my own queerness again. The attacks on my psyche wounded my soul and diminished the love inside my heart for myself. As a result, my young adult and most of my adult life have been spent ensuring the happiness and contentment of others, almost always at my own physical and psychological detriment. It was only meeting my husband, now of 19 years, that I began to see my catalyst for coming out to my family. A decision that once I made still secluded me from them for almost 2 years while we figured out how to be in relationship with one another again. It resulted in me missing the death of my grandfather, to whom I was very close. Even after coming out, I still continued to tell myself that I was only worthy of love when ensuring other people's happiness. I still struggle to love myself. To be honest, even now the struggle is real. Loving ourselves is a process. Our Unitarian Universalism reminds me daily that my own worth and dignity is not dependent on anything else, but it is instead inherent. Or, as one of my colleagues reminds me on Facebook, I am whole, I am holy, and I am wholly loved. As Unitarian Universalist, you are holy, you are whole, and you are wholly loved. Everyone has the potential to embody love and act through it, and it is a process. I didn't always love myself. I experienced this process as a pathway for us to learn to hold close our universalist belief that we are all connected in an interconnected web, and that we can each save one another while turning away from the more rigid individualism that plagues our faith movement and our nation at large. This work is both individual and collective in nature. It is difficult work that requires all of us to engage in deep self-reflection and come to an understanding that while none of us individually has the answers to the big questions of life, that together, maybe, just maybe, we can find a way through that uncertainty. For me, I've had to evaluate my place in this world as a white, cisgendered, queer, able-bodied male. It has resulted in my own recognition of internalized misogyny that often bleeds into transphobia. I am often reminded of my deeply held racist thoughts and words that need to be checked and rechecked again and again. This process of self-reflection and unlearning, followed by relearning, is grueling, time-intensive, and frankly, hurts. And yet, I know it must be done. One of my favorite Christian scripture verses in the Newer Testament is from the book of Mark, chapter 12, verse 31. In this verse, the Christian prophet Jesus is answering a question posed to him from the crowd about which of the holy Hebrew commandments is the most important. His response has two parts. The first is love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself. It was many years before I really thought about that second commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. I've come to understand this scripture in a new way. The love you give yourself is the love available for you to give your neighbors. To me, this is a profound realization. It means that the love that I had been giving others all my life is in fact fully available to me as well. And that if I choose not to embrace my whole self, if any of us choose to ignore our whole selves, then we are limiting the love we have available for all. In this age of COVID-19 and racial reconciliation, I struggle to watch and find meaning in the actions of those who can't be bothered to wear a mask or can't be bothered to fight to end police brutality. I struggle with those who spend time and effort debating words and themes in place of trusting the experience of those most affected by the important issues. I struggle with those and myself who, because of our privilege and refusal to recognize it, remain convinced that we are beyond race in this congregation and in this nation. And then I remember that I didn't always love myself. And the words of Jesus just dance with that realization. Love your neighbor as yourself. Could it be that these two are deeply related acts? Perhaps investing time and efforts on self-exploration in a way carves out shame and pain and makes room for love that once present inside you or me can explode outward. Those in our midst who are so deeply hurting, full of shame or pain, do not realize that they have limited their ability to love. I didn't. Their personal experience is one of being loving. They love their neighbor, their God, in their own way. Of course, to anyone who has done some self-reflection and deeply commits themselves to the work of love, looks back at them and sees that those acts are still harmful and hateful. But how could we not think that? How could they not realize that? We all limit the love we give when we refuse to open ourselves up. I can't force anyone to reflect on themselves and expand their capability of love any more than anyone could force me to do the same. But I can create spaces that facilitate that growth. We can create spaces that facilitate that growth. For example, our actions in the public square can promote healing to all. At the moment, California has begun voting season, and we have choices to make. For each candidate and measure, I am choosing to ask myself a simple question. Does the candidate or measure work to promote love for my neighbor? When I find a measure that makes me emotional, that I may or may not agree with, I then spend some time investigating why I feel that way. What have I learned in my past that enforces those thoughts or feelings? Do all of those thoughts or feelings, do any of them diminish my sense of love for myself or for others? These reflective questions help me not only in my voting decisions, but in my everyday life as well. What do I feel when I hear the phrase, "free them all," as I drop a banner on a bridge? What, if anything, do I feel when I hear defund the police or abolish them? And where are those feelings coming from? Is it a sense of fear? Is it an overinflated sense of my own importance? Is it that I, in all my years of life and education, still may be ignorant of some issues, and that makes me feel small? These are the questions that point to places where I limit my own ability to love. There was a hurt so deeply embedded in the peers who urinated on my pads all those years ago. It makes me very sad to think that they lacked the strength to investigate why they chose that behavior. But then I remember, I didn't always love myself either. And that's when part of me understands their actions, part of me understands their hate. Now I'm on a path of love, I hope, at least. One that invites me to daily explore my understandings, my misgivings, my inadequacies, my insecurities. Each breath I take asks me to carve away at those deep embedded limitations so that I may make space in my heart to love others. I want to love my neighbor as myself. How about you?